So over the last year, I've interviewed probably 500 people on how they're utilizing AI, understanding their tactics, their workflows, what's working, what's not. And I found that there's a wide gap between what most people use AI for and what the top performers use AI for. And today I want to share the 7 habits that kept on popping up in those conversations that I would label as AI pros that are using these tools. And most people are missing these habits completely. But these habits are what separate okay results from really good and useful results. So if you want to see what separates the pros from everyone else, let's dive in. Alrighty. So as always, we have ourselves a interesting image that's been given to us from OpenAI, and this is its interpretation of the top 1% of AI users on top of this pyramid. Very ancient Rome style. As usual, we have a variety of areas we're going to walk through. Like I said, 7. So we'll start on the left, go right. So the first item here is talking over typing. And the name of the game here is optimizing speed. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get as much information out of us into the AI and trying to get as much information out of the AI into us. And the best way to do that is talking to the AI and then reading from it because we talk faster than we type and we read faster than we listen. And there's a variety of ways that you can do this. It's mainly dictation. You can do it on your phone and your computer. And common tools that I've seen people use is there's baked in tools that are already inside of our operating systems. So Windows already has dictation you can use, and Mac already has dictation you can use both in the laptop and the phone. So that's one way. Another way is actually these applications have it in the application itself. So ChatGPT does a good job at having it everywhere. So it's inside of their mobile app, it's inside of their web browser, and it's also inside the desktop. I found that it's actually quite useful. It's probably one of the best dictation services I've seen so far. It can pick up almost anything, no matter where I am, no matter what the background noise is. It's going to pick up what I've stated, and it's almost going to be 100% accurate every single time. Claude has on their mobile phone, so I mean the mobile app, they have a version as well that allows you to use dictation. And that's pretty good as well, but it doesn't have it for web and desktop. And if that's the case, you can either use the one that's in the operating system you have, or what I'd recommend is trying some of these agnostic tools. So I think this is Super Whisper and this is Whisper Flow, both of which have free versions that you can use on an ongoing basis, at least right now. And that free version is really good. And if you want to subscribe for a few dollars, you can get even a better version. I usually use this one. I think it's Whisper Flow, but this is Super Whisper, but I've used Whisper Flow in the past. So the moral of the story here is that these top 1% users, they tend to utilize dictation to get information out as quickly as possible and consume information as quickly as possible. I want to put a quick pause in the video to say below is a link that goes to a free AI Insight series where it goes for 30 days where I'll give you free insights on how to utilize AI most effectively in your business and your day-to-day work. If that's interesting to you, go ahead and check it out and back to your regular programming. So the next one here is going to be context heavy. So these top 1%, they are context heavy when they're talking to AI. They try to have AI understand everything about them and their scenario before they give them a prompt. And they do that because they know that these top state-of-the-art models, such as O3, Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude 4 Sonnet, etc., they need a lot of context to be useful for certain scenarios. And what this looks like is you have this entire section here, which is the entirety of the text you're putting into the AI, most of which is context. So this up here is your prompt. This is the thing you're asking it to do or to respond to, etc. And then down here is all the context you fed it. And this context can manifest in different ways. So it could be a document you sent in from Google Docs or PDF. It could be a transcript from a meeting or a video or a podcast. It could be the history that you want to provide to the AI around your history associated to the scenario. So it could be a negotiation with a client, a proposal. It could be a response to an email thread that you've also pasted in there. And that's the next point here is you can add email threads as well. Just paste that in so it has context of what's happening. So it gives you the best optimal response for both the tone of your voice, but also the context of the scenario you're responding to the person with. And then also you can put in books. So you can put in entire books in some of these models. So Gemini 2.5 Pro can, I think, take up to, it's like 10 versions of War and Peace. So you can put entire books in here as long as you have the PDF variant of it or the TXT version of it. So context is king, and context is critical to get the most out of these models for the different use cases. And that's what the top 1% use. And one thing I wanted to call out here is it's not just putting in context, because oftentimes if you just put in a bunch of context without context, it's not going to be as useful. So you need to know when to insert context, where to insert it, and what to insert. Things I wanted to call out here is when. So oftentimes if you're doing something where it's a task that's more complicated, so if you're doing a basic search, you're asking AI about a question or something, in that case, you likely don't need a ton of context. But if you're asking it to take an action on your behalf of writing something, summarize something, or giving you advice on something, you probably want to give it a lot of context. That's a good optimal scenario to do that. Where is another important piece. So you don't want to necessarily put all of your context at the top of the prompt and then put your prompt or your instructions at the bottom or the middle, because there's a concept of lost in the middle. So we'll do LOM for lost in the middle. And this is sometimes the AI will get lost in the middle of the prompt if it's too long and it loses the important critical information in the middle. If that happens, you should structure your prompt like this, where you have at the very top, you have your prompt, and then at the very bottom, down here, you could have a reminder of the important critical information associated to the prompt. And then in the middle, you have all your context. It's going to mostly pick up all of the context, but sometimes it'll lose some of the information here. And you want to make sure the critical bits that matter most are on the outsides. That's the where part. And then last is what? So what do you put in there? Well, that's based on what you're trying to achieve and the conversation you're having. So you need to be selective on what you insert. So if you have maybe you have an entire book you want to put in there, but you only have a question about chapter 7. Well, maybe you should just put chapter 7 in there instead of the entire book, or maybe chapters 6 through 8 so it has context around that chapter. But instead of putting the entire thing, and maybe you choose a certain segment of the data so it has a better chance of answering your question or taking the action you want it to more effectively. So that, my friends, is context heavy. Next is the AI mindset. So this is interesting because it reminds me of a conversation that Sam Altman had recently, where he talked about there's an interesting thing he's noticed between, I would say, people. I think it was like a people above 30 and people below 30, and their usage of AI. And he mentioned people above 30 tend to use AI as a replacement for Google, which is a good use but not optimal. And then people below 30, they tend to use it as an operating system for life, meaning they use it for almost every aspect of their life. And this is something I've noticed the top 1%. Age relevant because I've talked to a lot of people at different ages, and it's really just AI native mindsets. And what that means is a few things. So, first is people are always thinking with AI in mind to start. So, when they're doing a task, irrelevant of the task, they're asking themselves, can AI assist with me with this task completely or partially? If it can, I'm going to try to do that. If it can't, then I'll do it myself, which is fine. So always thinking model first when you take any task on. And then the next one here is this is a basic thing that everybody should do and try is remove Google from your life and replace it with AI. And sure, there are some cases where you'll need Google when you have to cite certain sources or to go to certain places to get information, etc. But that should be a small proportion of your searches day to day. And you should replace that with AI. And you can do that through like things I've stated dictation. So if you're on the move and you're doing something, you can just do dictation with ChatGPT, ask it a question, it'll give you a response. And if you're sitting down, obviously, you can do the same with dictation. And the reason I recommend dictation is it removes the friction of you typing something out, and you can just easily just say it, and that helps. And then lastly is if you do something twice, ask yourself, can AI help automate this? And this is a common tactic I've seen a lot of people use, is if it's done twice or three times, then there's a threshold into which they ask themselves, can I automate this with AI? Oftentimes the answer is yes, and it's not completely yes for the entire thing, but there's a partial yes, I can automate some of this. So that is the next one is the AI native mindset that a lot of people have. Next is a convo buddy. So this is another habit where people utilize their AI as a conversational friend or advisor. And the best model I've seen so far when it comes to the voice itself and the conversational ability is ChatGPT's advanced voice mode. It is limited. It'll bump you down to the basic mode if you don't have Pro, which is I think $200 a month, which is totally fine because the basic version is still pretty good. And there's a variety of use cases of how you can use this. As a reminder, this is what it looks like. So when you go into ChatGPT, there's usually a little button in the bottom right hand corner. You select that, and you're going to get a screen like this. When you're talking to it, it's going to have these beautiful clouds. That is the voice mode you would use to start with. And there's a variety of different use cases I've seen people use, and I've used myself. So one common use case I've seen a lot of people use it for is therapy. So therapy is expensive, and oftentimes therapists don't have the context and or maybe the specific expertise you're seeking. And what people I've seen do is they'll actually feed a lot of prompt and context into the AI before speaking with it and turning this feature on, and they'll ask it to take on a certain type of therapy. So maybe they prefer CBT, or maybe they prefer a persona, such as Jordan Peterson, or something along those lines, where they have that individual help them dissect an issue and understand themselves both in the issue itself, but understand themselves better in general. Next is relationships. So I've seen a lot of people do this both for friendships and also marriages, where they use this to help them kind of guide them in that situation and help them improve in the marriage or friendship. Another one is sales. So this is, I think, a really good one for a lot of businesses is practicing your sale before the actual sale. So you have a lot of people that are trying to pitch new features or products inside of SaaS companies or elsewhere, and you have a new product that gets rolled out, and you have to practice. Oftentimes, people practice either with themselves or they practice by just reading something. But I think this is really good because you can allow the AI to take on different personas in different scenarios. And maybe you're pitching a CFO that is one version of it's very aggressive, one version could be mellow, one version could be skeptical, one version could be condescending, etc. And you have to practice this pitch of this product or service in a variety of different scenarios before you actually go into the situation of pitching somebody. So this is great practice and kind of a mock-up trial before you do anything that's serious. Next is negotiation. So maybe you're trying to negotiate a salary or negotiate something else. It allows you to practice that negotiation with the context of what you're trying to achieve, your past, as well as the context between you and that person you're negotiating with. Another one is debate. So this is something I used quite a lot in the past, where in my past gig, did a lot of presentations. So I'd present to a lot of executives and boards. And when doing this, I had to prepare for a lot of the counter arguments that someone would have on the advice that I was providing. So I had to prepare for those conversations, and this was a great avenue to have a debate partner when practicing those conversations. Interviews. This is a pretty obvious one I've seen a lot of people use, where they utilize this basically to practice their interview skills. Reading buddies. This is interesting, where you basically have the AI sitting up next to you while you're reading, and it's always on. And when you're reading, maybe there's a question you have about a part of the book. So you say, "Hey, I'm reading this book on this topic. I'm trying to understand what this is going on. Can you help me out?" And it answers the question, and then it stops and it sits there, and you keep reading. So it's kind of an ambient agent that's always sitting there to help you give you insights on the book you're reading. And then last one here is language learning. So this is another one I've seen people use where they test and practice their language learning abilities with an AI, because oftentimes there's different ways of learning language, right? So you can read, you can write, you can speak, but also conversing is pretty critical as well, if not one of the most critical versions of speaking a new language. And being able to converse with somebody is not always an option for most people. But if you have an AI that can speak that language pretty effectively, which most AIs can, you can use it as a conversational buddy to practice those skills. So these are just some of the different use cases for conversational buddies, but there are many more, and these are just the ones that I've come across when speaking with people. All right, next is project pros. So project specifically is referring to Claude and ChatGPT have project variants or versions. And I have two examples here to show you what that looks like. They're identical and how they're structured. So this is OpenAI's. And a project structure is basically creating a customized version of an AI that is tailored towards that use case. So imagine just having a large board of advisors. So each of these advisors on your board have specialties. So maybe this one here is relationships. This one here is fitness or nutrition. This one here is finances. Maybe this one's on taxes. This one could be, I don't know, something else. And you have all of these experts in these areas that are helping you in different aspects of your life. So it's basically in a board of advisors, and you can customize those little members of the board to be tailored towards a certain area. And a lot of the people that I know that are pros in utilizing AI, they honestly probably use projects 80% of the time, and then they use the basic ChatGPT or Claude 20% of the time. So most of the time they're using projects because that's tailored to their use case and their preferences, and it's an easy way to get a high quality answer without too much effort. And so how does this structured and how do you use it? Well, like I said, they're the same for both. With OpenAI, you have your input box like anything else, but you have these two things down here. And what these are is allowing you to add more context and instructions prior to you talking to the AI. So you're priming it effectively before you speak with it. So the added file section, this is the knowledge base. This is the context you can provide to the AI. So this is all the things I mentioned previously. This could be screenshots, it could be books, it could be PDFs, it could be transcripts, it could be all those things you upload into its knowledge base that I can reference before it talks to you. And then instructions, these are just the system prompts. So this is the system prompt you write that is very tailored to that specific scenario. And you might ask yourself, well, maybe I don't know how to write a system prompt effectively. Well, that's a great question you can ask AI. You can have AI write the prompt on your behalf using best practices as of today for your scenario. It'll research those best practices, create the prompt, and you can then upload it in here to have a good prompt that has both the knowledge, the instructions, it can help you solve that problem. Claude's the same exact way. So this is the Claude variant of this. This is what theirs looks like. And if we zoom in here, it's the same setup. So we have the chat window you speak with, and then over here we have the knowledge base. So in here is where you'll upload those files. So that's all the files I mentioned previously. Oh no, sorry, that's not the files. I take that back. No, this here is where you put the files. Sorry. So this is where the knowledge base sits. And then this is the system prompt where the instructions go. And it's the same process, same idea. And then some people might ask, hey, why not custom GPTs? Why not use custom GPTs versus projects? Well, there's a lot of different things that you can get from projects that you can't get from custom GPTs. One of which is you can select the specific model you want to use for that project. And I always recommend using the best model available. So you can see O3 is switched on here. It's going to give you the best answers mostly. Also, you have a tool section here that allows you to automatically switch on different tools. So you can have web search, you can have the canvas feature, you can have image creation, etc. And it's going to be optimized for your specific use case. Same thing applies to projects within Claude. They have their feature here, and they have the model selection here. So you want to make sure you're using the most optimal model and optimal feature for the specific scenario you have that project set up for. And then below are some examples of different things that I've used these models for, and I've seen others use them for as well. So one is corporate taxes. So you can have it actually help you with corporate taxes. I've seen one guy save around 100K by just asking his corporate tax AI and then passing that off to his actual accountant and them stating that this actually would work, and they did, and they applied it. Another one is I've actually personally saved 10K with corporate taxes by just understanding a basic thing that I didn't know and passed it off to my tax guy, and he applied it. The next one is contract writing. So maybe you have a GPT that helps you write contracts for deals that you're preparing for, or proposal writing. So this is actually another thing that I have another video on where I write proposals probably within 5 minutes instead of 3 to 5 hours. And it's they're all structured the same. They have really good high quality inputs, and they're also customized to each client based off of what the need is. Newsletter writing, so another version of writing where you allow the AI to follow a specific structure for the newsletter that you prefer, a tone of your voice that you like, and also length for that piece. So you can have it tailored to your writing style based off of the context you give it. So maybe you give it previous samples of newsletters you've written yourself that you appreciate and like. It'll use that as inspiration, as well as a system prompt you provided that gives a detailed understanding of how you like to write, the length, etc. Here we go. YouTube titles. This is very meta. I'm making titles for videos. I often have AI help research different titles for videos that I've recorded or I'm going to record, and gives me guidance on what are some of the best practices as of that time and date for titles. Another one here is relationship advice. We've already talked about this, but you can apply that for both advanced voice mode and also projects. Nutrition. So maybe there's a specific type of thing that you have going on. So I deal with IBS sometimes, and I have to eat lower high FODMAP move foods, and I prefer high protein. So that means that I have these constraints the AI understands. So when it gives me advice on different types of meal plans, it knows exactly what to tailor that towards. And then another one here is longevity fitness advice. So you can see both of these. So this one for the relationship advice has Esther Perel, and this one has Peter Attia. In these cases, you can actually encapsulate a person's expertise into a project by taking some of their books, some of their podcasts, some of their guides, some of their meta conversations, and synthesizing that down into something that can be shoved into the context of an AI so it understands and can take on that persona or that expertise lens when giving advice for a certain topic. And this is something I've done for both longevity and relationships. All right, that's project pros. Next is model arbitrage. So this one here is basically not being tied to any given model. So here we have a variety of models, most of which are kind of the top ones today. So we have ChatGPT, we have Claude, Gemini, Grok, and Perplexity, each of which I use for different purposes. And I'm always trying different scenarios out with different models. So it's important to not be attached or religious with any specific product from AI providers or models or features, etc. You need to be trying all of them at all times. And it doesn't mean you have to subscribe to all of them. But the good thing is all of these are monthly. You should be on monthly subscriptions. You shouldn't do annual because most of these models are advancing so quickly that if you lock yourself in for a year for one product, maybe in 6 months it's no longer useful because there's three other versions of another model that's much better. So you want to keep yourself flexible in what you use. And for instance, when I look at these models right now for ChatGPT, I use this for image generation, obviously, because it's really good at that. I use it for data analysis, and I use it sometimes for broad research. So broad research. And for Claude, I'll use this for writing. I'll use this for rendering dashboards for presentations. I'll use it for deep research, not broad research. And the difference between these two is broad research is when I just use O3 without the research feature kicked on. And deep research is when I kick on their deep research feature and I research with this. There's a lot of reasons as to why I do this. long story short, is this is a multi-agent architecture that's more effective. And this one tends to do a good job at doing a broad analysis of a specific question that's not as deep. Those are just some use cases. Gemini, I'll do gnarly bugs that I'm trying to solve. So that could be bugs. For another one for Gemini, I'll use this for long contexts. So this has a 1 million context window, and it does a good job not just doing needle in the haystack finds, but also kind of going spanning across ideas, across kind of synthesizing ideas across a large PDF or a book. So say maybe I have an idea in chapter 1, chapter 7, and chapter 8. I have to string across all those ideas to then synthesize the answer to the question that was asked. And it does a really good job at that. Grok has really great access to X, so it has good insights into what's happening there. And also, its unhinged mode adds a lot of creativity to certain types of writing that you would like to get crazy with. Perplexity has interesting access to different sources that others don't when you're doing research. So if you want to do different types of research on different sources that maybe these others don't have access to, then I'll leverage this one for that. So these are just a few examples of how I use these, but it's important to note all of the top 1% of the people I've spoken with, they all use different models for different purposes. And the only way you know what model is good for which purpose is through practice and not being attached to any given model. So you're always trying them all for different reasons. Another really important thing here is that instead of just using each one for a different purpose, oftentimes I'll use all of them at once for a given scenario. For instance, sometimes when I'm researching something that I think is quite important that I want to have really good insights into, I'll do a deep research call. And that deep research call, I will give to every single one of these models. And as all of these do deep research for me, I'll then consolidate and read mostly every single of the responses. And then I'll consolidate the best of each one of these. And I'll sometimes do it manually if I want to really thoroughly understand the idea. Or if I don't, then I'll take all of the outputs and I'll put them all into a given model, usually Claude. And then I'll have Claude summarize and synthesize the best parts of this into a final report that I then read. So there's different ways you can use this. The important point to take away is not to be attached to any given model. All right, and then finally is trend surfing. So the point here is that I think it's important to a trend. I spelled that wrong. Let's correct that internet right now. Let's do it live. Maybe not. I gotta go to pen mode. Here we go. How do you spell trend? Like that. All right. So trend surfing, what am I saying here? So trend surfing is basically to point out that I would recommend that people keep up with what's happening with new models and products coming out. And you don't have to keep up with it every day. You don't have to research things all the time. But I would say once a week or once every 2 weeks, you go to one or two sources that you know are high signal. You catch yourself up maybe for 20 minutes, and then you have a good idea of what advancements have happened in the last week to 2 weeks. And then you not just understand it, but you practice and apply it. That's what the top 1% do. They don't just consume, they apply. So they see a new model came out, they get that model and they try it on their use case. They say, okay, it worked, it didn't. If it's better, if it's not, then I replace and move models around based off scenarios. And if you want to get kind of what I do, here's a video right here that you can check out that I've written out all of the 13 AI sources that I use currently that I think are high signal to noise when it comes to things that are actually useful. And then if you don't want to watch that and you just want to get one good insight, this is one newsletter that I'm subscribed to, and it's not mine. This isn't a promotion for myself. This is somebody else. And this newsletter, it comes out daily, so I wouldn't recommend reading it daily if you don't necessarily want to do that daily. But I usually put all of these in a folder, and once I put them all in a folder, I then read up on these once a week. So Sunday for 20 minutes, I'll catch up on everything, and it's not long. It takes me literally 20 minutes or less because yeah, these newsletters are super long, but what you want to focus on is the top of the newsletter, which is a summary. And the summary usually is 2 to 3 paragraphs at max. So read that, understand what features and models have been released, not just read it, but also apply it. So grab those features and models, play with them, see how they work, and then keep yourself up to date. And this is just a link to that newsletter if you actually want to look at it. That is the video. And if you enjoyed that, reshare it with your friends. And also, below is a free 30-day AI Insight series where I'll send you 30 insights over 30 days, giving you exact tips and tricks on how to utilize these tools effectively within your day-to-day work. Also, I have another link down there for my offerings. So if you want to work with me, you can check out and see what ways we can work together. With that being said, Internet, I'll see you next time.